And welcome to our second training. So our second and final training before Advocacy Day. So this is how to advocate for change, how you can improve paid leave and paid sick day policies. My name is Charlotte Flanders. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Education and Training Manager at the California Work and Family Coalition, and I will pass it to Jenya.
Hey everybody, Jenya Cassidy, Director, California Work and Family Coalition, and I will pass it to Katie.
Hi all, good morning. My name is Katie. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Political Organizing Director at the Coalition, and I will pass it to Angelica.
Hi everyone, my name is Angelica Andrade. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am the Administrative Assistant and Spanish Training Coordinator here at the Coalition, and I will pass it to Jared.
Hello everybody, my name is Jared Caceres. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Communications Manager for the Coalition, and I'll pass it back.
So we are the California Work and Family Coalition. We are a statewide alliance of organizations united in the belief that all people should have time and resource to care for themselves and each other. We do this through organizing, advocacy, and education. We are fighting for a world that all workers and family members have access to paid leave to bond with new children and care for our families. This is a list of our wonderful members. This can be found on our website. And if you're interested in joining the coalition, there's also a form where you can join as a member as well. And so for our presentation goals today, one is to learn how to speak about a bill that is important to you, two, practice what to say when meeting with a legislator, and finally, learn what you can expect during a legislative meeting. Just like last week, I do want to say that you do not have to memorize everything. You do not have to be an expert. We're here to support you, and all of the slides and resources that we will provide will be provided to you as well for reference after the training. With that being said, let's get started, and I will pass it to Angelica.
Thanks, Charlotte. So to start off, preparing to speak in a legislative meeting. Next slide, please. So our goal for today is for all of you to identify at least one bill that you care about and practice sharing why that bill is important to you, so that you can feel confident when you meet with legislators and or their staff on May 5th. So next week. Next slide, please. So you may have multiple perspectives on why a bill is important. This may be because you are personally impacted by the problem that the bill proposes to solve. You are living or working in a community that would benefit from this bill becoming a law. You are a person who feels that this bill is important because of your values, or you are knowledgeable about the policy gap that this bill proposes to solve, or all of the above. Next slide. So now let's review the bills that we are advocating for this year, especially on May 5th, next week. So as we discuss each bill, you will have an opportunity to reflect on why this is important to you. And so now I will pass it to Katie, who will go over the bills we are advocating for.
Thanks, Angelica. So just as a review, these are the bills that are identified as priorities for the California Work and Family Coalition for this year. One of them has already been enacted, which is COVID-19 supplemental paid sick days. And then we're going to dive into a little bit more detail with the other bills right now. So next slide, please. So the first bill is SB 951, authored by Senator DeRosso, and this is also a budget ask, which means it's asking for this. We're also asking for the same change through the budget process. What this bill would do is it would ensure that Californians earning low wages receive 90% of their income from paid family leave for all 8 weeks of paid family leave and for the first 16 weeks of state disability insurance. So this is super important because we frequently hear from people who aren't taking all the leave that they're entitled to or aren't taking leave at all because of these low wage replacement rates. I think the most important thing we want to communicate about this bill is the impacts of increasing the rate to 90%, but I did also want to share a little bit about the funding because we might get some questions about that. So in order to pay for these improvements, what both SB 951 and the budget ask would do is delete a provision of the law that currently exempts high wage earners from having to pay into the programs the same percentage of their income that low wage workers do. So with that, I want to stop and give folks a chance to either put in the chat if you think this is a bill you might want to talk about during Advocacy Day, or do a reaction on Zoom, and also see if anyone has questions about this bill before we move on. Amazing. I'm seeing some folks posting in the chat that they might want to talk about this. Not hearing any questions right now, but if any questions occur to you, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the training as well. Excellent. All right, let's move on to our next bill, which is, I believe, AB 1041. All right, so this is AB 1041, authored by Assemblymember Wicks, which is a chosen family bill. So what this bill would do is it would ensure that Californians can use their caregiving leave to care for a designated person, and that person can be a member of their chosen and extended family. So right now, you can only take caregiving leave for the list of family members listed on this slide, which leaves out a lot of folks who are caring for people outside of that list of family members. So again, wanted to just kind of pause, see if anyone has questions or people want to put either in the chat or post a reaction on Zoom if this is a bill you think you might want to talk about during the Advocacy Day.
I'm sorry, Katie, could you repeat that? I didn't hear it.
No worries. So this bill would ensure that Californians can use caregiving leave to care for a designated person who can be a member of their chosen and extended family, and just offering folks the opportunity to either post in the chat if this is a bill they're excited about and might want to speak about during the Advocacy Day, or also see if anyone has any questions about the bill itself. Awesome. So seeing some people who want to talk about this, that's great to hear. And again, if you have questions about this bill or they occur to you later, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them later on in today's training as well. Next slide, please. All right, so this bill is a Senate Bill 1058, authored by Senator DeRosso. What this bill would do is it would require the EDD to collect race and ethnicity data from paid family leave and state disability insurance claimants. The EDD does not currently collect this data, and so we don't have ways of knowing officially if there are racial disparities in uptake or awareness of these programs. And so this bill is pretty straightforward. It would just require the EDD to collect this data, and so that both the state and advocates can take a look at if there are racial disparities and then develop solutions to address them. And I'm already seeing people posting in the chat that they're excited about this bill. So again, feel free to post in the chat if this is a bill you think you might want to talk about. And I also wanted to open it up for questions.
Can I ask, is there current opposition to this? And if so, what is it?
That is a great question. There is no opposition to this bill as far as I'm aware. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so this is AB 1949 by Assemblymember Lowe, which would require California employers to provide up to 5 days of unpaid but job protected bereavement leave after the death of a family member. There's no current requirement for employers to do this. And so, you know, we have heard from people who unfortunately were not able to take bereavement leave. So again, feel free to post in the chat if this is a bill you think you might want to talk about during the Advocacy Day, or let us know either in the chat or by unmuting yourself if you have questions about this bill. That's a great question, Ruth. I believe that it's using the same list of family members under paid sick days and paid family leave law. So it's kind of linked to that family member definition. But I will double check that and get back to you. I think, all right, seeing Ruth, sorry, I should read these questions out loud. Ruth's first question was, does the bereavement leave apply only to specified family members? And then, so if that family definition changes, would bereavement leave change too? My understanding is yes, and that's the intention, but I will double check that and let you all know for sure. I'm seeing people who want to talk about this bill. Any other questions? All right, so let's move on to our final bill. Okay, so this bill is AB 2182, also by Assemblymember Wicks, which does two things. It would require California employers not to discriminate against people based on their family responsibilities. So things like being a parent, caring for an elderly family member, or any other family member with a serious health condition. And there are already other protections for people from employment discrimination based on things like your gender or race, ethnicity. So this is just sort of add family responsibilities as another reason why employers can't discriminate against someone. And then the second part of the bill is requiring reasonable accommodations for employees whose child or family member's school or place of care was unexpectedly closed. So I think the best way to explain this part is just with an example. So if, for instance, a child's daycare was unexpectedly closed and that employee needed a reasonable accommodation, like temporarily switching shifts with a colleague, coming in a little bit late and not getting in trouble for that, or if they could do their job from home temporarily while they were making alternate care arrangements, these are the kinds of accommodations that would be included under this law. So again, if you're excited to talk about this, let us know in the chat, and also wanted to see if anyone has questions about this bill.
Katie, sorry, I did have a brief question about this. So let's say like a mom comes back from maternity leave and her shift is 9 to 6, but her daycare closes at 5. Could she request accommodations to change her shift to 8 to 5 based on this bill?
That's a really good question. So what this bill is designed to do is sort of anticipate unforeseen school or care closures, so unexpected ones. So if it's a regular need, this bill would not require an employer to accommodate that. It's just for unforeseen school and care closures.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification.
Katie, do you know if the bill will require specific documentation from those claiming discrimination based on that, or like, is there anything in there regarding that?
That's a great question. I don't actually know the documentation requirements, but I will find out.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this one? And thank you for your questions. If you have the question, somebody else probably does too.
I do have another one. So like when you request a reasonable accommodation, do you know if this bill requires the employer to participate in an interactive process to figure out what would be the best reasonable accommodation, like the discrimination, like the other discrimination laws?
I don't know. I will look, but what I can do is I can post the bill text in the chat, and I just want to make sure I'm being 100% accurate when I respond, but so I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, thank you. I could look at it. Thank you so much.
I'm seeing Melody's question in the chat. So this protects workers if they take paid family leave. It's a little bit different. It's designed for someone who is working, but but has family responsibilities. So that person could be a parent, they could be a caregiver of a seriously ill family member. Does that help, Melody? And let me know if that doesn't make sense.
I think just to say that, some other laws do protect people when they take paid leave. This isn't necessarily designed for that, but we do have, job protection, California Family Rights Act that kind of protect people's rights when they take paid leave, if that's helpful.
I see Amardeep. Go for it. I am having trouble hearing you, Amardeep, but I think you might be muted. We still can't hear you, Amardeep. I don't know. Do you want to maybe post it in the chat? Any other questions on this bill or any of the other bills that we talked about? We'll give Amardeep a second. All right, so I'm gonna read your question. So will this help, say, if you're a parent, your kid's school water pipes break and that school is shut down? I don't know about that specific example, but yes, that's the kind of protection that it's designed. So if there's a wildfire, if there's COVID outbreak or something that's unexpected that causes your child's school to close, and you have, then it requires your employer to, try to accommodate you, as long as whatever those accommodations aren't an unreasonable burden for the employer. Great example. I hadn't thought of that, but I'm sure that happens.
Can I ask a silly question? Like, what if it's something like your daycare just decides to randomly have a staff development day or something, and they close, but they don't give you a lot of notice, and could that count, or does it have to be for some type of disaster type of thing?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I think the intention is more around unforeseen things. So things like school holidays, anything that, would, but I will, again, I'm noting all these questions down because they're really good, and I'll get back to you all on that.
And Jeanette asked about the unreasonable burden. You probably see that, Katie, so.
Yeah, so I'm not an attorney, but it's sort of I think my non-attorney understanding of that is anything that would make it, not possible for an employer to continue to conduct their business. And it is a standard. And I know we do have attorneys on here, so feel free to jump in on that, because I know that's a standard for other laws too. Or Jenya, I don't know if you had anything to add.
No, not necessarily on the legal front, but one thing that a couple of people who couldn't make it here today, but will be there on the 5th, have a lot of expertise in this bill, and it's kind of for us, this bill is one of our priorities, but not one of the top 3. And I think there'll be a few more people that will be in these visits. And anytime we don't know the answer when a staffer asks, it's fine to follow up. So we do have people we can ask. That's my helpful chiming in.
Thanks, Jenya. And I know we have to move on because of time, but I do see Kimmy's question. So yeah, it's around unforeseen circumstances. And you can use paid sick days if your child is sick. So want to remind folks about that too. All right, so if you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will do our best to address them here. And if we can't, we'll find out the answer and let everyone know before Advocacy Day. Next slide, please. All right, so this is kind of what Jenya just said, but you do not need to become a policy expert on all of these bills to be an effective advocate for change. I think we definitely, want to give you all the support and information to be able to answer questions. But I think the most important thing we're trying to communicate in these meetings is why these issues are important to us, either personally or the communities we're working with, and why we want the legislators to take action and support them. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it to Jenya.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with Katie that, when we're talking to our legislators, we're really there to share why this bill is important to us, and whatever information we can. Often we follow up with them to share more information if we have questions, but we totally don't have to be an expert. So next slide. So when you're talking to your legislator, you're an expert on your own experience and why this bill or issue matters to you. So a lot of the examples that we'll be sharing today are people giving examples from their own life or the community that they're from or who they represent. Some of you are in organizations that represent a certain geographic location or a certain type of worker, and you can share both from that perspective or even from your own perspective. And I think, you know, it really is important to remind the legislator or their staff that the bill is important and has just real impacts on people living in California. A lot of times they're very excited to meet constituents, and it's just so important for them to hear, you know, how this impacts the constituents and the leaders in there and the people in their district. They really just have to balance a lot of different interests and perspectives. And, you know, they're making decisions about what legislation to support. So just hearing from us and, you know, giving them just a lot of information about why a bill is important is one of the most important things we can do for any of these bills. Next slide. So, you know, one of the things that we'll talk a lot about is why we're sharing personal stories or sharing our perspective. And I think it's really empowering just to speak your truth to somebody who has power to change our laws. And it really, like I said before, it can be from a lot of different perspectives. You yourself could experience something. When we're talking about this, we're talking about something that's so deep to us, our families, and how this impacts family members, how some of these laws impact family members. And it can be, you know, a little bit emotional. You definitely don't have to go there if you don't feel comfortable, you know, digging down into emotions. But I know these are such, you know, important things to us and important things in our lives that, you know, it's just one of the things we learn in this work is that you know, these issues impact everybody. We all have families. We all need to care for ourselves. Sometimes we all need to be there for family. You know, so you really kind of learn too that you're not alone, that a lot of other people have these similar experiences. If you're experiencing something, so are other people in your community. And it just really does give us confidence sometimes to speak up about issues like, you know, I speak both as a person who has needed paid leave. I speak as a renter. I speak, you know, a lot of different experiences that I've talked to my legislators, both city council, state legislators, and even Congress people, both from the work I do, but also from my own personal perspective. So I think it is one of the most powerful things that we do. Go ahead, Jared, next slide. So one of the things that's really important about this lobby day coming up is that we're really just encouraging people to share what you're most comfortable with and what feels empowering for you to share. It's, you know, totally fine, like I said before, to get emotional is totally fine. These emotions are exactly why we're advocating for these bills. These things really do impact us. You know, you can decide to leave certain details out, to share details. It really isn't about having to, you know, share everything. It really has to be part of the empowering thing about it is it absolutely has to be something that you're just really comfortable sharing. We're going to be meeting in groups too, and there's other people who are there to support you and to share other aspects of the bill or other bills that they care about. So, you know, I feel like one of the things that's really important, and I mean, these kind of lobby days are actually can be very enjoyable and empowering. And I think one of the key things about being in a group is that we're all kind of looking out for each other and supporting each other. Next slide. So if you decide that you want to share something personal, that's great. You have a different, you know, you can have a different speaking role as well. You can speak about the need that you see in your community. You know, for example, I'm a renter here in my community. Sometimes I talk about renter issues to city council. I have one experience, but my neighbors are having a different experience. I can share my own, but I can also share how what's happening in the community impacts the community as a whole. That's definitely true when it comes to things like paid leave that have, you know, health impacts. We talk about the health impacts of being able to be there for our family members, how, you know, it's very important when you have a loved one that different family members are able to care for them, and how important that is to their healing, their well-being, and our own economic security, that we can take that time off and not lose our employment. And then I think it's really key to ask the legislator, look them in the eye, ask their staff person at some point, do you support the policy? Often they frankly won't always come right out and say they do unless they're already a co-author or something, but it's really important to make that ask and to keep, you know, pushing them to affirmatively support the policy. Next slide. So remember, it's your decision to speak up about the issues that matter. And, you know, that's why we're advocates. So you don't really have to say the perfect thing each time. And, you know, it's really just about being there, showing up, and sharing your truth about why this policy matters to you. So how to share your story or personal perspective. Oh, next slide, Jared. So the most important thing you can do when you're getting ready to share a personal story is, you know, think to yourself a little bit about why you care about the problem that the bill is going to solve. So, you know, if you personally experience the problem, if you see the problem really often and how it impacts the community you live and work in, you know, seeing it as important to solve because of your values or beliefs. All three can be definitely true. You know, when I think about paid leave, I can sometimes talk about taking it when I took it for the twins. I can think about, I didn't have it. It wasn't in existence when my son was born. You know, I can speak from that perspective, but also I can speak from even, you know, being where I live and helping neighbors and friends be able to access these issues. I mean, access these policies is really important. And then obviously, I just value the fact that we all should have the right to balance our work life and our family life. So one of the things that you want to then go to is, you know, how does this bill specifically address that? And I think, for example, if SB 951 passed, I would have a different experience because I would be able to afford to take the time or not go into debt while I was taking the time. So I personally would have had a different experience. People in the community I live in and work in would benefit. More people would be able to take time off. And then I would see my values and beliefs reflected in our laws, the fact that we all as workers should be valued and our time is important and we are whole people that have families and lives. I think that's a really important value to uplift too. The next slide. So now we're going to go into our breakout groups, and I think I'm passing it back to Katie, right?
It's actually Charlotte who's going to give us our breakout group instructions, but it's all good. Charlotte, go for it.
No worries. So as Jenya mentioned, there's many ways you can share your story. And we also have talking points. So you'll have talking points you also have access to on Advocacy Day. Katie, do you mind putting the link in the chat to the talking points so everyone can look at them? So during the practice group, we will have about 15 minutes. You'll be in small groups, and this is where you can practice either sharing your story or using the talking points or whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to pause our recording, share my screen. Alrighty, so I will pass it back to Jenya.
Okay, so here's your what to expect in a meeting with your legislator. That was a great day where Jerry Brown signed paid sick days. Anyway, we'll go back to that picture later. It's probably on our website somewhere. So with legislator meetings, just typically they're fairly short, usually. 15 to 30 minutes is good. One of the things I think is really, really important that I don't think it took me a while to kind of get is that meeting with staff can be just as, and I would even say sometimes more important than meeting with the legislator. When you meet with the legislator, it is kind of nice to connect with them, especially if you're a constituent. It is good to have them know who the people are in their, you know, district, et cetera. But you can make more of a sometimes meaningful, if you will, connection sometimes with staff, and staff really are the ones that are educating themselves in a lot more detail about the bills and educating the legislator, because that legislator can't keep all the bills in their head all the time, and they really do rely on staff a lot. So I feel like we shouldn't feel bad at all, and sometimes in fact it can even be better to connect with staff. So you know, it's their job to really keep the legislator briefed and, you know, kind of inform them. And, you know, often staff really can sometimes sway the legislator in a certain direction. That's why it's important. Next slide. So we are going to be in these meetings, we'll have different roles, and that kind of keeps the meeting moving pretty smoothly. There'll be a group leader, and really the group leader is kind of facilitating and making sure everything moves along. The group leader does not have to be an expert on every single bill or even an expert on, any one bill necessarily, but what they do is make sure everybody kind of gets to speak, introduces themselves, they connect with the legislator, maybe they're taking responsibility for the follow-up later. So in terms of the speakers, it's really important that people in the group kind of, go in knowing they're going to share why the bill is important. Some people will share a personal story, like I was saying a little bit earlier. Often people will play the role more of sharing the health impacts or other impacts of the bill. And then the people in the group, not necessarily the leader, but sometimes the leader, can briefly explain what the bill does. Really just depends on the makeup and how large your group is. You always want to make sure one person is going in knowing that they are going to make the ask. If they forget, it's okay for the group leader or somebody else to jump in. This kind of thing happens all the time, that people will, it's not even so much nervous as more like excitement in the moment that you kind of will sometimes forget to do that. But just making the ask is important. Will the legislator support the bill? Will they answer you? Not always, rarely, but it's still very important to get whatever feedback or questions you can from either the legislator or the staff member, and kind of bring that back in the, to the group, because we are going to be wanting to track everybody and see where they are on the bill. If you're not sure that, what speaking role you'd like to have, I think it's very important for everybody to introduce themselves, because part of the information that staff person or legislator is taking away is who is in the meeting. So saying, I'm Jenya Cassidy and I'm a constituent of Assembly Member Bonta. Just important for that staffer to know that a constituent was there. Maybe even just saying, and I care a lot about wage replacement or this bill, or something like that. Just having that be minimum. Not everybody has to share a story. Sometimes there's not time for everybody, but it is good. Being there is important in and of itself. Introducing yourself is important in and of itself. Next slide. So making the ask, the legislative staff person, it's really interesting because you don't even know exactly where they're coming from. Sometimes they may not want to say where the legislator is. Occasionally it's something that a legislator always supports. So you might hear something like, well, he usually does vote yes on these bills, or something like that, but they may not want to make an affirmative promise because they don't want to have to take it back later. So they will also just usually talk about just sharing their notes. So just giving them as much information and answering their questions or following up later with the answer if you don't have it, can be very, very important. And, also same with the legislator. They may say that they need to study up on it more, or they may be non-committal, or they may be vaguely supportive because, they're running for office usually. They run for office really often. They may not want to seem negative at the moment, whether or not they support the bill. I mean, we've had some that do have full-blown arguments, but that very rarely happens. So usually they'll be at least somewhat pleasant. Next slide. So putting it all together. Katie?
So we're gonna have a bit of a role play. So we're gonna have a bit of a role play. So Jared is gonna spotlight a few of us, and Katie, if you want to explain what the role play will be.
Yeah, so we want to kind of demonstrate a fictional example of what one of these meetings with a legislative staff person might look like. And I think we're all going to rename ourselves so you can kind of keep track of our different roles in this. I'm going to be the group leader. Charlotte, do you want to introduce yourself and your role in this?
Yeah, so I'm going to be one of the speakers. I'm going to be a community advocate. And for me specifically, I'll be using talking points. Jared?
I will be a constituent for Senator Cassidy, just really sharing my perspective as a founder.
And Jenya, do you want to share your role?
Yes, I will not be Senator Cassidy. Just to be on the realistic side, I'm going to be Elaine Marks, Senator Cassidy's staffer. I recently got promoted to Chief of Staff and I'm very proud. Go ahead.
All right, so now we are going to sort of begin our role play, and then we'll have a chance for you all to ask questions, give us some feedback at the end. So Elaine, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today about these really important issues. My name is Katie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm with the California Work and Family Coalition. We're a statewide alliance of a lot of different kinds of organizations, but who all believe that if we're sick, we're recovering from illness, or caring for a family member, we should be able to do that without risking our job or pay. And we're here today to talk to you about a number of really important bills that we're supporting this year. And we're hoping to just do some introductions, have some constituents and advocates on the call, share why these bills are important to them, and then see if you have any questions. How does that sound?
Oh, that sounds great, Katie. Thank you very much.
Great. And Elaine, do you want to just introduce yourself and your role in the Senator's office as well?
Yes. Oh, thank you. So my name is Elaine Marks, and I was recently the communications director for Senator Cassidy, but I just got promoted to chief of staff, and really excited to meet with all of you. Thank you.
Well, congratulations on your new role. We're excited to meet with you too. Jared, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jared. I am a recent father, and I've been a constituent and live in Senator Cassidy's district for 10 years now, and I'm here to support SB 951.
Great, thanks, Jared. And Charlotte?
Hi, Elaine. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. My name is Charlotte, and I'm a community advocate that works for an organization representing LGBTQ+ and immigrant communities in the Bay Area, and I'm here to talk upon AB 1041.
Great. Nice to meet both of you. Thank you.
Great. So with no further ado, Jared, do you want to talk a little bit about why this bill, SB 951, is so important to you?
Yeah, I'm here today to talk about SB 951. I am a recent father. My wife just gave birth just last month, and I really wanted and was looking forward to taking paid family leave to spend time with my son, and also being able to be there to support my wife. But however, I couldn't afford it. I have rent, I have car payments, I have all the new baby clothing and everything, and I couldn't get by with just like half my wages. I think we should raise the wage replacement rate so that way parents and everybody could take paid leave when they need to. And I think it's just terrible that we have to choose between like our bills and our family.
Oh, well, thank you, Jared. I really appreciate you sharing your story. Just a quick question. So wait, this is a SB 951. This is a Durazo bill. Is that right? That's the wage. What is the current wage replacement rate, and how much would it change?
I actually don't know about that, and I could just pass it to Katie.
Yeah, that's a great question, Elaine. So currently, wage replacement rates for paid family leave are 60% for most workers. What SB 951 would do would be to increase the wage replacement rate to 90%.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you, both of you. I appreciate that. Taking note.
Do you have any other questions about SB 951?
No, I mean, I'm really looking forward to talking to the Senator about it. This sounds like a great bill, usually up her alley. You never know.
Well, great. Well, thank you. And thank you, Jared, for sharing that. It's a really important reminder of why this bill is so impactful. Charlotte, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about AB 1041.
Yes, so as I mentioned, Elaine, I work with a lot of immigrant and LGBTQ+ communities in the Bay, and AB 1041 really impacts a lot of the way they take caregiving leave. So right now, you can only take caregiving leave for a specific list of family members, and this narrow definition disproportionately leaves out caregivers in the LGBTQ+, immigrant, and multi-generational households. And the state of California California. California has the largest LGBTQ plus population in the US, and many LGBTQ plus people have been kicked out of their homes and ostracized by their biological families, and often don't have relationships with their biological relatives. So what AB 1041 would do is would ensure Californians can use caregiving leave to care for a designated person who can be a member of their chosen and or extended family. And this would, be more equitable access for families who often don't fit into the traditional definition of family. So we hope the senator would consider this bill.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this definitely sounds like something that the senator would be excited about. Like I said, I can't make any promises, but just a quick question, Charlotte. So
Mhm.
AB 1041 is for a designated person. How, if you designate a person, does that designation last for years? How does that, what if you needed to change it later? Would you be able to change it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the entirety of the bill, so I'm going to pass it to Katie to answer that.
Yeah, so my understanding is that you would be able to designate someone, and I believe you'd be able to change it for the following year. But you know what? I'm going to double check that and get back to you because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right information. So I'll send a follow-up email and include the answer to that question. Thank you for asking it. Do you have any other questions about that bill?
No, this sounds really good. Thank you for sharing that. And Charlotte, thank you for sharing the impact it has on the communities you represent as well.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. I did just also want to highlight another bill that should be coming your way soon, which is SB 1058. Right now, the EDD doesn't collect race and ethnicity data from people applying for paid family leave and state disability insurance. So we're lacking some pretty important information to be able to assess if there are racial disparities in terms of uptake or access to those programs. So also just wanted to highlight that bill for you. Do you have any other questions for us, Elaine?
No, I mean, I can't believe that they don't already do that. That seems just crazy to me. No, I just want to say that, I personally really appreciate what you're all doing. I, needed to take leave at one time for myself. It is very hard to afford. I can only imagine how hard it is for a lot of people. And I will share this information with Senator Cassidy. And if you could, I don't know if you have anything to leave behind or leave in the chat, or any other bills that your coalition supporting. And then just, I would love any follow-up on the designated person question. So, yeah. And thank you again for sharing. And Jared, thank you. We're always so happy to see constituents.
Yeah, thank you so much. We would love to know if you could count on Senator Cassidy to support these bills.
Well, I will definitely be talking to the senator, and I'm pretty sure that all of these bills sound like something she's supported in the past. Like I said, I can't really make any promises, still kind of early in the session, but I will be talking to the senator, and I really appreciate her all coming by.
Well, thank you so much. We will send a follow-up email. I'll include everyone who is on this call, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, stay safe and have a good day.
And scene. I think we can unspotlight ourselves and come back into the virtual room with all of you. I'm sorry, I already saw some questions in the chat, and also wanted to just open it up, feedback, reactions, questions.
I thought it was really good. I'm wondering if you're going to try and have someone in each group that is really familiar with the law. I think that would be really helpful for some of us.
That is definitely our intention. That said, if you can't answer a question, I think some of the best advice I got on that recently was that's actually great because it gives you an excuse to follow up with the office. And I think it also helps build trust that you're not just saying, things off the top of your head, you're really trying to get it right. So, and that also happens to me with some regularity, and I meet frequently with legislators. So it's really not the end of the world if you can't answer a question. But yeah, we are trying to kind of keep that in mind when forming the groups. And I saw the question in the chat about the wage replacement rates for low-wage workers. So the way that SB 951 currently defines a low-wage worker is anyone who's making less than 70% of the state average weekly wage, which right now is about $57,000 a year. And yes, the 90% rates would only apply to people who are considered low-wage workers.
Katie, I saw another question in the chat as to how many people will be in each group on Advocacy Day.
It depends. I think that some of the groups may be a little bigger than what we just modeled out, but it really does depend on geography, because I'm really trying to keep that in mind as we get everyone organized. So maybe five-ish, 6 people.
So we have a little bit more things to cover before we wrap up today, and we can leave some time for more Q&A at the end, if that sounds good to everyone. Is that good to go, Katie? To keep going? All right. All righty. So, Jared?
Yeah, so I'm here to talk about some common challenges that we may face when we are meeting with staffers or with legislators. So often they might seem distracted or having a hard time to connect with what you're saying. During my first legislative meeting, I was sharing my personal experience for COVID supplemental paid sick leave. My partner, she had COVID during that time. I was telling the staffer that my partner had COVID, why paid sick leave is important, and they just didn't respond or have any reaction to my story. I think during that moment, something that I did is to pause, take a deep breath, and just make sure that you complete your story, and also share why you're there, and also just continue to be polite and connect with the staff. It definitely was trying to have the staffer to just completely not respond to my story, but I'm sure that there's something else going on, and I was just glad to be able to be there and share my story as well. Next slide. Yeah, and another common challenge is the staffer or the legislator could also ask tough questions or questions that you might not know the answer to. What we're doing is to hopefully have a group leader, so that way somebody in the group during Advocacy Day could answer the tough questions. If we don't have a group leader, or if we don't exactly know the answer, it's totally fine to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will find out and get back to you. It's a great way to have something to follow up with, to remind the legislator or the staffer about the issues, and also to update them on the answer to their question. And also, if they have concerns about the bill, about certain parts of the bill, just take a deep breath, and also make sure to share why the bill is important to you. So thanks for sharing that concern. Yeah. But from my perspective, the bill is important because of my family, or it would help me with this. So it's really important to share your personal story or your community's stories, and make sure that those concerns are heard. I can pass it back to Katie.
Thanks, Jared. So I know we're ending with challenges, right? But I think one thing to keep in mind is the path to policy change includes a lot of tough meetings And I think that if things don't, if you're not sure how your message was received, it's just important to remember that those offices may be some of the most important folks for us to meet with, because they're not hearing our perspective regularly, and we want to make sure that that happens. I know we had a lot of really tough meetings, like Jared was saying, on COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave, and all of those were super important to making sure that legislators understood why this was so important. And also, we also need to support each other and kind of back each other up. If someone in your group shares something really powerful, let them know that it moved you, or if someone does a really great job explaining the bill or answering a question, let them know. So we are going to keep sticking together as we do this and keep raising these issues. So next slide, please. So with that, I want to dive into a little bit of the logistics for Advocacy Day. We are going to have a welcome and orientation from 10 to 11. As a reminder, this will all be virtual and on Zoom. At 11 o'clock, we're going to divide up into teams or groups. Each group will be organized based on geography. And thank you so much to the people who are helping to lead those groups. It's a really important part of the day. You're going to have your own kind of individualized group schedule, and everyone will have some built-in time to prepare before their first meeting and a lunch break between 11 and 1:30. And then from 1:30 to 2, we'll come back to the main Zoom and report back on how the meetings went. Next slide. So I know we got a question around language access, and I did also want to sort of talk a little bit about interpretation. So we are going to have interpretation for Spanish speakers during the Advocacy Day. This means that everyone, both English and Spanish speakers, will need to choose a channel in Zoom so that they can participate in the meeting and get and hear the interpreters. And just a couple of best practices for bilingual meetings, just to speak a little bit more slowly than you might otherwise. Pause after you finish speaking. And if anyone lets us know that there's an issue with interpretation, we want to pause the meeting until we resolve those issues. And yes, as Jared said, we've also been doing Spanish language trainings for the Spanish speakers who will be participating on Advocacy Day. So with that, I think we're going to stop talking. I think there might be one or two questions in the chat we didn't get to yet. So I want to make sure that we address those and just open it up for additional questions, feedback on the role play, anything else any other questions people have. One thing I did just want to share is we got a great question last time around how job protection works. If people have to take paid sick leave or leave, and then they need to take job protected leave under the California Family Rights Act again. So the answer we got to that question was that if someone is employed for that full year, but takes leave, that sort of checks the box for the requirement to be employed for a year. But the paid sick time or leave would reduce the total number of hours worked. So checking that 1,250 hours would still be really important to make sure that they qualify for job protection. And I'm just looking through the chat. Any other questions that people have about this? All right, are people feeling ready, or more ready, I should say? All right, well, that's what we had. So amazing job, everyone. And thank you so much for being with us today. I don't know, Charlotte, if you had any final words before we close.
Nope, just thank you for being with us, and just a few more resources, just similar to the last training of regarding paid family leave, other resources that just explain the current laws. And of course, we will be sending the recording to this video. So yeah, we'll send all the slides. I have the links to everything that we have. We'll send the talking points. And just thank you for joining us today, and hopefully that it was helpful, and look out for our emails as we move towards Advocacy Day. So thank you.